There's a term that was popular in the 90s in computer circles, killer app. It refers to a program that was so significant, so good, so transformative, that it drove consumer adoption of a new technology. People needed to use it or play it, and so they had to get the hardware associated with it. Ys 1 and 2 was the killer app for the PC Engine CD-ROM. It can't be understated just how important this release of Ys was, both to the PC Engine and to the Ys series. To understand the significance of this release, we really have to start with Nihon Falcom. In the early 80s, Nihon Falcom was a computer store located in Tokyo, and it didn't take them very long to realize that they could publish their own software. And then shortly after they started publishing software, they realized, why don't we just make it ourselves? Nihon Falcom made a lot of different games at that time, but the thing they were most interested in were RPGs. They made some games that were extremely popular and extremely influential. Dragon Slayer and Xanadu in particular led to massive series, huge sales, and mountains of imitators. But the true masterpiece for Nihon Falcom came after those successes, and that was Ys. It was an action RPG released for computers that brought an entirely new approach to the genre. And if that wasn't enough, the presentation of the games was incredible. The music in particular was a high point for computer games at that time. Ys was a monster hit, but even before it was released, they had a sequel in the works. The original Ys only tells half the story. You'd have to play Ys 2 to get the conclusion. The Ys series were the hottest computer games in Japan in 1988, and that's where our story has to make a bit of a jump. Keiichi Iwasaki was a programmer at Hudson, and he had some downtime after finishing his work on Susanoo o Densetsu. So he wound up playing Ys 2 in the office. His boss said, if you like it so much, why don't you just port it? And Iwasaki thought, well, maybe I will. One small problem with that, Nihon Falcom hated Hudson. You see, Nihon Falcom had licensed one of their other games, Xanadu, to Hudson to make a Famicom port. Hudson realized that a port of Xanadu just would not work on the Famicom, so they made a totally different game of their own and called it Fa-Xanadu, short for Famicom Xanadu. Hudson still thought it was worth trying to get Ys on the PC Engine though, and Iwasaki put together a proposal. He went into a meeting with the presidents of Nihon Falcom and Hudson and suggested using the CD-ROM to put both Ys 1 and Ys 2 on a single disc. The CD-ROM would also let them keep the music intact. The president of Nihon Falcom was hostile through the entire meeting, and at the end of it, the president of Hudson asked, "What do we need to make this happen?" The president of Nihon Falcom replied with a very large amount of money. Enough that Iwasaki thought it was over right there. Except then the president of Hudson agreed to that price on the spot. That's where Ys 1 and 2 comes from, and Hudson never screwed up the relationship with Nihon Falcom again by making a completely different version of one of Nihon Falcom's games. The PC Engine version of Ys 1 and 2 is a very impressive port. And naturally, since it's on a CD-ROM, they added fully voiced cutscenes.
伝説は語る。イース。かつてこの地上に栄華を誇った理想郷。イースは2人の女神と6人の神官によって統治され、強大な力を秘めた金属により繁栄を極めた。
The Japanese version is up to the high standards that Hudson had been creating for video game audio at that point. Perhaps a little rough around the edges, but not that far down from your typical animated show in Japan. Of course, when it came to the US version, NEC redid all of the audio, and it's actually good.
Are you here to rescue me? How wonderful it would be to escape these chains. I have been locked up here for too long. My name is Fina.
Yeah, I know, I'm shocked too. NEC had high hopes for Ys Book 1 and 2, hoping that it would have the same effect in the US as it did in Japan when it came to sales of hardware. Well, it didn't. The US version features the voice talents of people like Thomas Hayden Church, Jim Cummings, Michael Bell, Alan Oppenheimer, Debbie Derryberry. Basically, professional voice actors. Now, the script that they had to work with was a little bit rough. It's a video game from 1989 after all. But the whole cast put in a very good effort. We won't see this level of voice acting talent in US games for quite a while after it. Fans of awful voice acting can rest assured that I'll be back to programmers trying to sound tough in a few episodes' time. I'm going to stick with the US version from this point on, since there is so much text in the game. The title Ys refers to a mythical lost city that sank beneath the waves off the coast of Brittany. There's a lost kingdom in the game Ys, but it really doesn't have anything to do with the French legends. Mihan Falcom just took the name. The game's plot is that Adol Christian has arrived in a new country. Somehow, the ship he was on didn't sink, and he's met at the dock by a fortune teller who says that she has an important message for him. That message is that he needs to seek the Books of Ys, and as an adventurer, Adol just goes along with it. The very first thing you need to do is get equipped. You have some starting cash, but you can boost that by spending all of it on a ring in the shop and taking it to this guy in the bar. With that done, you can afford 2 pieces of equipment instead of just 1. However, there's 4 equipment slots: swords, shields, armors, and rings. The rings all have magical effects and have to be found, while most of the rest of the equipment can be bought in the shop at the first town. There's not a lot of progression in the first Ys. You have the starting town, a small village off to one side, and then a few dungeons. The first Ys game is notoriously short. If you're not rushing things, you can probably beat it in about 5 hours. I got about 2/3 of the way through the game myself in my recording session, and I didn't break out any maps until the end when I was trying to rush to get to the next boss. So you've bought your equipment. How do you put it on? Well, you hit select to bring up a menu, then choose equipment, and finally make sure that the item is highlighted. When you're equipped, you're ready to leave town, and you can get into the actual meat of Ys. The way that combat works in Ys is you run into people. Just walk straight into them. How you walk into them has a significant effect on the damage done. Straight on, face to face is the worst way to do it, but it's often unavoidable. On the other hand, if you strike an enemy from behind or the sides, then you'll do extra damage, and there's no chance of them doing damage to you. The flip of that is also true. If an enemy runs into your side or back, then you'll take more damage. However, there's a pretty significant scaling factor in Ys. Your level and equipment has a huge effect on the outcome of contact with a monster. If you're not high enough level, you might not damage a monster at all. And if you are strong enough, then it might be impossible for the monster to damage you. As a rule of thumb in Ys, if an enemy is giving you trouble, then you probably just need to earn 1 or 2 levels. Defeating a monster will get you some gold and experience, and how much experience you earn depends on your relative levels. When you're much stronger than a monster, you might only get a single point of experience for defeating it. You'll need to acquire more than just weapons and armor as you play. Other items go to your inventory, the same way you put on other equipment. If it's highlighted and then you back out of the menu, then it's what you're using. Items that have to get used get activated by pressing button 2. But some of things, like the mask that makes hidden doors appear while also turning enemies invisible, are always active once they're selected. You recover health in Ys just by standing still, assuming you're in a safe area or someplace where there's sunlight. Later on, you'll get a ring that can do this anywhere, but initially you might have to exit the dungeon in order to restore health. You can save the game anytime from the menu, and there's 5 save slots available. But be careful because the game doesn't auto-save in any way. When you die, you go back to your previous save. So save early, save often. One word of warning about saving: any monsters that were in the area also reappear when you load, so it's possible to save in a bad spot. One of the really important things about Ys Book 1 and 2 was that it combined the first 2 Ys games. Ys 2 only came about because Nihon Falcom couldn't make a single game with everything they wanted. But here it is, all in one package. That did result in a few changes. All of the enemies are rebalanced so that your experience gains occur across both games. And after you defeat the boss where Ys 1 would end, you get a very long animated cutscene and get dropped right into Ys 2. You keep your experience, but your inventory is reconfigured to fit the new game. The combination of Ys 1 and 2 was so successful on the PC Engine that it became the standard for how Ys was released going forward. So if you've played a release of Ys made after 1990, then you've almost definitely played a version that combined both games into one and was based on this PC Engine version. Beyond that, I get the impression that this port of Ys, as well as events that were occurring in Nihon Falcom at the time, contributed to their pivot toward console gaming. No one's actually come out and said that's why it happened, but in the 90s, Nihon Falcom starts pivoting towards consoles. And if there's any one massive success that would give them an excuse to do that, it's this release of Ys 1 and 2. While the release of Ys Book 1 and 2 might not have made a big splash in the US, it was huge in Japan. And both versions have retained their reputation as beloved classics. To this day, people argue if the PC Engine version is the definitive version. My take on it is, I think I'd actually rather play the most recent Windows version, but only because it's a bit more polished. And there's a few classic versions I prefer over the PC Engine version. But that's just because Ys has been ported to literally everything. And my preference for those other versions doesn't mean I hate this version. This is a very, very good game. One of the foundational action RPGs. Historically significant, and it still plays pretty snappily. If someone came up to me and said, "Where do I start with the Ys series?" Just start with one of the releases of Ys 1 and 2. It's a magnificent game, and one of the highlights of the PC Engine.